Okay, picking up where we left off, we're on page 162 talking about slicing and sprites. Slicing is the thing of, instead of me sending you one gargantuan photograph, I actually like putting in, a pan of brownies. I take it and I slice it up into a couple of chunks. And the idea is it's easier for the machine to take chunks of these things and then later stitch them together. It's a kind of an esoteric kind of a thing, and I'm not going to require you to do that. But it is a feature that exists. And so you basically tell it, this is like the upper right-hand corner, and this is the upper top, and here's the upper left. And, it's like you fill in all the puzzle pieces. There's another one called sprites, and sprites are kind of weird. Let's say, for example, that I had 3 graphics that I use, and it switches between the graphics a lot in my application. I would have one graphic file that had all of these tiny little images. Now, admittedly, for a sprite to work well, each one of the sprites basically have to be the exact same size. So I take this, and then I have another one and another one, and just like this example here, the house and the left arrow and the right arrow is one image. So I send you one image, and then after you've got the image, I tell you I want to use this first part or this second part and this third part. It just makes it speed up a little bit. Instead of having to go and getting 3 separate graphics files and then using them, I just get one big graphic file and tell it to use a part of them. And again, it just speeds things up a little bit. The examples are not that tough. I mean, I basically tell it that here's my image, and then I tell it where it is in that coordinate system. This means I want the upper, left-hand corner guy. All right, it's kind of weird, huh? All right, let's move on. On page 162, they talk about where do you go to get the sources of your graphics. Can I just go right here and do a right-click and do save picture? Yeah, I can do that, right? I can go here and just take this and, okay, I've got their photo, and I'm just going to use that graphic in my files, in my web page, right? No. I've heard a gazillion people say, look, I found this image on the internet, so of course I can use it. No, absolutely not. Okay, you can't just go to the internet, find an image you like, and steal it. That's called stealing. Okay. And a lot of people also get, if you go to one of these websites that do graphics, sell graphics for a living, they'll say something like royalty free. And you go, it's free, I don't need that. No. What that means is you pay one time for the graphic file, and you don't have to pay a royalty every time you use it. So royalty free does not mean free. It just means I don't have to pay to use. I pay one time up front. There are lots of ways you can make money off of graphics. One is I can give it to you for nothing, but you have to pay me for every time you use it. That's one model. You can pay up front a fee and not have to pay me anytime you use it, and a combination of the two. You pay up front a small amount, and then I get a small amount every time you use it. That's how royalties work. Okay. Whew. So there are lots and lots of places you can go to get honest-to-God real free graphics. Just go to any one of the search engines. Just type in, free graphics. And there's a gazillion of these things out there. And make sure you get to one of those that really, 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 really is free and not just royalty free. Like in this case, there's 10 images for $40, and okay. And a lot of the search results here are going to be people trying to make money. So don't be surprised if when you type in free graphics, you don't end up a web page that has free graphics. All right, I'm just telling you. In the book, there's a list of a bunch of these websites where you actually do get honest-to-God real free graphics. That's what I would recommend. They go through some guidelines on how to do graphics, and we've covered a lot of this. So this is going to be a little bit of a review. First is image reuse. If you throw an image file at somebody, it's going to get cached on their machine. And so if you reuse it, the same image over again, the machine won't have to go back and get that. It says, wait, I've already got that one. I'll just reuse the one that I have cached locally. So for example, never have like a Trillium 1 and a Trillium 2, which are the exact same image, right? Because then the machine's not going to know that they're the same image, and it's going to pull them down. Just use Trillium twice, okay? All right, makes sense. Image size and quality. Yeah, you need to have an outside application to be able to change the size, the pixel density, and adjust the quality that you want. You know, I will tell you that sometimes the size and quality is a tough call. Let's say you're making a website for a photographer. Wow. Is he or she going to be really picky on the quality of his photographs on the webpage? Yeah. That's most likely where you're going to have to do the little thumbnail trick. Like, click to see this in real size. Okay, cool. Load times. Don't have too many graphics or large graphics so that the load time of your web page is really slow. Okay. Resolution. Most people consider the web a low resolution medium, about pixels per inch. You know, somewhere around 100 pixels per inch. You might. It kind of sort of changes a bit because the newer iMacs and newer portable devices have really, really high pixel densities now, in the 200 range. So somewhere around 100 to 200 is about what you'd expect for a web page. Please do specify the dimensions, the width and the height when you're doing a graphic, and I explained why. It's because it can leave a hole and continue rendering the page without stopping the rendering engine and say, geez, this guy didn't tell me how big it is. I guess I'll go figure it out myself. Damn. And then brightness and contrast. Make sure you don't have, super, like the example that we have, that it's horrible. That's ridiculous. You got to have something a lot lighter if you're going to be using black text. So particularly when you're using background colors and images, you got to pay attention to brightness and contrast. Along the same lines, they talk about accessibility. Never rely only on color. For example, you can never ever say, click on the red button, because if you're colorblind, you don't know which one of those is red. Okay. Always have the text equivalent, that alternate thing. So instead of if I have graphics turned off, or if I have a screen reader's going to hit that and not know what to do with it unless you put the alt in there. And then if you're going to be using graphical hyperlinks, which I do, for example, if I go here to this guy, I have these guys. You need to have some honest-to-God real text. For example, this really is text, so a screen reader could tell that was the word article. But let's say you took a graphic of this, or the picture of this, so it really wasn't words there, it was actually a graphic. Then, you'd have to have some other way to doing it. You can't just have graphics alone as part of your navigation. It has to have text on it too. On page 165, they talk about all these crazy visual effects you can do. One of them is called the background clip. And that's for, I want a background image, but I don't want the background image on the entire frickin' thing. I want it on this one paragraph. So maybe I could do a block quote, and I want to change the background color just for that point. I want to clip the background to just this one piece. Or perhaps in reverse, I actually have a background, but this one piece here, I do not want the background to show. I want to do an anti-background. Well, clipping would allow you to go in and give special emphasis on a particular area, not talking the entire background, but a particular area. Background origin, it provides you a little bit more control on placing the graphic inside that box model. In other words, do I want to put it on this graphic at the margin or at the padding or at the, where do you want to put it in that box model? Background size. You could use background size to stretch an image. If you had a normal aspect ratio, you could have it stretch for the size of the screen. Now, you can't do that in advance because you don't know how big the screen is. So stretch means occupy the entire width of, well, if I'm using it for stretching left and right. If I'm stretching the width, what that means is go ahead and just stretch to whatever size the guy has on his screen, which could be a really, really wide monitor, or it could be a little skinny monitor because he's got his phone turned up in the portrait mode. All right. Multiple backgrounds. Yes, you can have multiple ones, and you do kind of have to pay attention. For example, I can have a background, maybe a background color or a background pattern like Trillium, and throw another background image in. I would have to turn the repeat off the second time and have it like over here in the corner or this corner or this corner. Now clearly if I had both of them with repeat, well then the first one would paint and there'd be like another coat of paint on top and you wouldn't see anything. So in order for having multiple backgrounds to work, most likely one of them is going to have a repeat turned on and most likely one of them is going to have the repeat turned off. Okay, so order is definitely important. The border radius. You can do some cool stuff. Instead of having just a box like this, you can have rounded corners. So there's a thing called a border radius, which basically tells you how much of a curve that is in pixels. It's kind of cute. A box shadow. Remember we did the shadow text and it didn't really work all that well. But I can have a box and have a little drop shadow coming out of it. It's the exact same thing before. You know, what's the X offset and the Y offset and the, you know, the color and the diffusion and all that stuff. Just like the text shadow thing that we had done before. Opacity. On page 176, they okay, I've got a graphic up, but I don't want it to be on. I want to be able to see through it to see the rest of the stuff behind it. And you can change the opacity. You know, 0 means fully transparent, and I can't see it at all. 100 means it's not transparent at all, and I can't see anything underneath. So there's some really cool things you can do in there. And if I'm working with a block, you know, like this heading in the textbook, they grab like this heading thing and make it semi-transparent so you can see the image of a forest behind it. It's kind of cool, right? So the opacity thing changes the background color of the text. Background color here, not the text, the background color. Okay. There's another one called RGBA on page 178, and instead of changing the background, it's changing the opacity of the actual text itself. So now I can have the background 100% transparent, and then have the letters themselves like 50% transparent. And so you can see in the book where they have that their logo on behind the background of, and it looks pretty cool because it's semi-transparent. You can still read the text and you can actually still see the image behind it. So, what's the difference between opacity and RGBA? I just told you. That sound like a test question? Okay, cool. The hue, saturation, that guy, on page 180, it's the exact same thing, except they're just doing it with a different technique. If you're one of those photographers, you might work in the, the hue, saturation world, maybe. Gradients. Now, gradients are pretty cool. This kind of sort of looks like a gradient. So I'm going to do a gradient here. So I'm going to go back to this guy. And I'm going to get rid of this. Yeah, okay. I'm definitely going to have to get rid of that guy. The background color. And so I'm going to go in here and do a linear gradient. So here we go. Linear gradient. And how come I didn't get some help here? Linear gradient is not a known CSS policy. Are you nuts? Of course it is. Okay, that's weird. All right, I guess I'm not going to do a linear gradient right now. How very odd. Okay. Back to what we're talking about. Basically, there's a thing. It uses 2 top and 2 bottom, that kind of stuff. In other words, start at the top and then start with this color and end with this color from top to bottom or from left to right or whatever you want. It is kind of weird in that the item in the gradient has a space in it. The 2 top actually has a space, which is kind of confusing because you use spaces for the rest of it. I know, it's kind of weird. I don't like this one because of the spaces. And there's also one called a radial gradient. Rather than having it top and bottom, you can have it start in the center and kind of whoop, go out like that. Okay, so we've reached the end of this chapter, and I'll see you guys again in some future chapter.